In the vast, endless expanse of space, a small exploration vessel named the Silver Dagger drifted silently through the darkness. The ship was not grand or luxurious. It was a modest craft designed for practicality rather than comfort. Its crew consisted of 5 people, each with their own role to play in the mission ahead. Logan Carter, the captain, was a man of quiet determination and steady leadership. Mia Harper, the navigator, had a sharp mind for charts and coordinates, her calm demeanor often balancing out the tension that arose during long voyages. Kyle Bennett, the engineer, was a practical thinker who could fix almost anything with the right tools and enough time. Rachel Dawson, the biologist, carried an insatiable curiosity about life in all its forms, whether on Earth or beyond. And then there was Emma Lewis, the communications officer, whose job was to keep everyone connected, to each other and to the outside world. Their mission was straightforward: chart new star systems, gather data, and look for signs of habitable planets. It was the kind of work that required patience and precision, but it also promised adventure. Space was unpredictable, full of wonders and dangers alike. For Logan and his crew, this voyage was both a responsibility and an opportunity, a chance to make discoveries that might one day change humanity's understanding of the universe. On this particular day, the crew gathered in the cramped common area of the ship. The walls were lined with blinking monitors and control panels, their soft hum filling the silence. Logan stood at the center, leaning slightly against the table as he studied the holographic map projected before them. "We're approaching an uncharted sector," he said, his voice steady but tinged with cautious excitement. "Sensors are picking up something unusual, a large object drifting near an asteroid field." Mia adjusted the projection, zooming in on the anomaly. "It's big," she said, squinting at the readings. "Bigger than any asteroid we've seen so far. Maybe a derelict ship?" Kyle crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. "Could be, but if it's been out here for a while, it's probably just a hunk of junk. We don't have time to waste poking around." Rachel shook her head, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. "Or it could be something extraordinary. Think about it. What if it's alien? What if it holds answers to questions we haven't even asked yet?" Emma glanced between them, her expression thoughtful. "Either way, we should be careful. If it's abandoned, there's no telling what condition it's in. And if it's not..." Her words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Space was vast and mysterious, and not everything that lurked within it was friendly. Logan considered their points, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. He knew Kyle was right, they couldn't afford to get sidetracked, but he also understood Rachel's enthusiasm. Every discovery mattered, especially when it came to expanding humanity's knowledge of the cosmos. Finally, he nodded. "We'll take a closer look. Mia, plot a course toward the object. Keep your sensors active and alert me to anything unusual. Kyle, run a diagnostic on our systems. I want to make sure we're ready for whatever we find." As the others dispersed to their stations, Logan remained in the common area for a moment longer. He stared at the projection of the mysterious object, his thoughts swirling. There was something about it that unsettled him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Perhaps it was the sheer size of it, or the fact that it seemed to appear out of nowhere. Whatever it was, he knew they needed to proceed with caution. Hours passed as the Silver Dagger approached the asteroid field. The jagged rocks loomed larger in the viewport, their surfaces pockmarked and dark. Amidst the chaos of floating debris, the object finally came into view. At first glance, it looked like little more than a shadow, a massive, irregular shape that seemed to blend seamlessly with the void around it. As they drew nearer, however, details began to emerge. The surface was smooth and featureless, absorbing all light that touched it. It was as if the object wasn't just black, it was absent, a hole cut out of reality itself. "What is that?" Mia murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. She adjusted the sensors, trying to get a clearer reading. "I've never seen anything like it." Kyle leaned over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing. "It's not natural. Look at the symmetry. Someone, or something, built that thing." Rachel joined them at the console, her gaze fixed on the viewport. "Do you see those markings?" she asked, pointing to faint lines etched into the hull. They were subtle, almost imperceptible, but as the ship moved closer they began to glow softly, pulsating with a rhythm that felt almost alive. Emma shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "This feels wrong," she said quietly. "Like, we're not supposed to be here." Logan stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Whether we're supposed to be here or not, we are, and we need to figure out what this thing is." He turned to the others. "Prepare a boarding party. We'll take a shuttle over and investigate." The decision sparked a mix of reactions among the crew. Rachel was eager, already gathering equipment and jotting down notes. Kyle, on the other hand, hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "We don't know what we're dealing with, that thing, it doesn't feel safe." "Nothing worth discovering ever is," Logan replied firmly. "But we can't let fear stop us. Stay sharp, stay alert, and we'll get through this." With the plan set, Logan, Rachel, and Kyle suited up and boarded the shuttle. The journey across the short distance to the object was tense, the silence broken only by the occasional crackle of static from their comms. As they approached, the glowing symbols on the hull grew brighter, casting an eerie light across the shuttle's interior. When they reached the airlock, it opened automatically, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Logan led the way, his footsteps echoing softly as they entered the ship. The air inside was cool and still, carrying a faint metallic tang. The walls were smooth and black, reflecting none of the light from their helmets. Along the edges, thin strips of blue illumination pulsed steadily, guiding them deeper into the vessel. Rachel paused to examine the wall, running her gloved fingers over its surface. "This material, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's dense, almost impenetrable. Whoever built this knew what they were doing." Kyle scanned the area with his handheld device, frowning at the readings. "Something's interfering with my instruments. I can't get a clear signal. Feels like the ship itself is blocking us." As they ventured further, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing down on them in a way that was hard to explain. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting and twisting as if alive. Logan kept his hand close to his sidearm, his senses on high alert. He didn't like this place, not one bit. But turning back now wasn't an option. Eventually, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the ship. In the center stood a towering structure made of crystalline material, its facets shimmering faintly. Surrounding it were consoles covered in intricate patterns of glowing symbols. The air hummed with energy, vibrating through their suits and into their bones. "This must be some kind of control room," Rachel said, her voice filled with awe. She approached one of the consoles, reaching out to touch it. "No." Logan barked, grabbing her arm just in time. "Don't touch anything until we know what it does." Before anyone could respond, the symbols on the console flared brightly, bathing the room in blinding light. A low rumble reverberated through the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. Then suddenly, the light faded, and a figure appeared before them, a humanoid silhouette composed entirely of shifting radiant energy. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stared, transfixed by the sight. The figure radiated power, yet there was something almost sorrowful about its presence. It didn't speak in words, but rather in images and emotions that flooded their minds. And then, without warning, the true nature of the black ship began to reveal itself, a revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. As the glowing figure materialized before them, Logan, Rachel, and Kyle froze in place, their breaths catching in their throats. The humanoid shape shimmered faintly, its edges rippling like water under moonlight. It wasn't solid, not in the way humans understood solidity, but it radiated an undeniable presence, as if it had been waiting for them all along. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, vibrating through their suits and into their very bones. The figure didn't speak, at least not with words. Instead, it communicated directly into their minds, flooding their thoughts with images, sensations, and emotions. At first, the messages were chaotic, a jumble of fragmented ideas that left them disoriented. But slowly, The chaos began to settle, forming a coherent narrative. The entity identified itself as Aegis, a guardian created by a long-lost civilization to protect something, or someone of immense importance. A prison, Rachel whispered aloud, her voice trembling as she processed the information being fed into her mind. This ship, it's a prison. Logan frowned, his hand instinctively moving closer to his sidearm. A prison for what? He asked, though he wasn't sure if Aegis could understand spoken language. To his surprise, the figure responded immediately, projecting another wave of mental imagery. This time the message was clearer, darker, and far more unsettling. The Devourer. That was the name given to the entity trapped within the black ship. According to Aegis, the Devourer was not just a threat. It was a force of destruction so vast and insatiable that entire civilizations had fallen to its hunger. Worlds reduced to barren wastelands, stars extinguished, life erased without mercy or reason. The black ship had been constructed as both a weapon and a cage, designed to contain the Devourer and prevent it from escaping into the universe again. Kyle took a step back, his face pale beneath his helmet. "We need to get out of here," he muttered, his voice tight with fear. "This is way beyond us. If this thing gets loose..." "It hasn't escaped yet," Logan interrupted firmly, though his own unease was evident in the tension of his jaw. He turned his attention back to Aegis, focusing on the stream of information still flowing into his mind. "What do we need to do? How can we help?" Aegis hesitated, its form flickering slightly as if struggling to convey the next part of its message. When it finally responded, the emotions it projected were heavy with sorrow and resignation. Reinforcing. The containment would require a sacrifice, a deliberate act of selflessness to restore the failing mechanisms that held the Devourer at bay. Someone would have to stay behind, willingly giving themselves over to the ship to ensure its continued operation. Rachel's eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently. "No, there has to be another way. We can't just leave someone here." But, even as she spoke, the truth settled over them like a suffocating weight. The black ship was ancient, its systems degraded by time and the relentless pressure of holding back such a monstrous force. Without intervention, it wouldn't hold much longer. And if the Devourer broke free, "Let's focus on what we can do now," Logan said, his tone steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We'll figure out the details later. For now, we gather as much data as possible and report back to Mia and Emma. They need to know what we're dealing with." With that, the trio began exploring the chamber more thoroughly. Rachel moved toward the crystalline structure at the center of the room, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. She scanned the towering formation with her handheld device, noting how its facets refracted light in strange, unpredictable ways. "It's some kind of energy core," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "This must be what powers the containment field." Kyle stayed close to the entrance, keeping an eye on the corridor outside. His instincts told him they weren't alone, not entirely. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting in ways that defied logic. Every sound echoed unnaturally, distorted by the ship's oppressive atmosphere. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes lingered just beyond the edge of perception. "We shouldn't linger," he warned, glancing over his shoulder. "This place, it doesn't feel right." Logan ignored him, instead approaching one of the consoles surrounding the crystalline structure. The glowing symbols etched into its surface pulsed rhythmically, almost invitingly. Against his better judgment, he reached out and touched the console. Instantly, the room erupted in a cascade of light and sound. The walls lit up with intricate patterns, and the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Aegis flared brightly, its form stabilizing as it projected a new series of images into their minds. This time, the message was clearer. The black ship was not merely a prison, but also a library, containing the knowledge and history of the civilization that had built it. The symbols, the technology, the very design of the vessel, all of it was meant to preserve their legacy in case anyone ever stumbled upon it. But there was a catch. Accessing the information came at a cost. Each interaction drained more of the ship's dwindling resources, bringing the devourer closer to freedom. "We're running out of time," Logan said grimly, stepping away from the console. "Every second we spend here makes the situation worse." Rachel nodded reluctantly, tearing herself away from the crystalline structure. "I've got enough data for now. We should head back and share what we've learned." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Kyle noticed something unusual about the corridor leading back to the airlock. The shadows seemed darker, denser, as if they were alive and spreading. He pointed his flashlight down the passage, but the beam barely penetrated the gloom. "Something's changed," he said quietly. "This wasn't here before." Logan followed his gaze, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Stay sharp. We don't know what else might be aboard this ship." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing eerily in the narrow hallway. The blue strips along the walls flickered intermittently, casting the group in alternating bursts of light and shadow. Rachel kept glancing over her shoulder, her heart pounding in her chest. The sense of being watched had grown stronger, almost unbearable. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ship itself was testing them, probing their resolve. Halfway to the airlock, they encountered their first obstacle. A section of the corridor had collapsed, blocking their path. Debris littered the floor. Jagged pieces of metal and stone fused together in unnatural shapes. Logan examined the obstruction, his brow furrowed. "Looks like structural damage," Yanni said. "We'll have to find another way around." "There might not be another way," Kyle replied, his voice tense. "If this ship is falling apart, we could be trapped here." Before anyone could respond, a low rumble reverberated through the corridor, accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Frost formed on the walls, spreading rapidly like veins of ice. Aegis reappeared beside them, its form flickering erratically. The entity projected a single urgent message into their minds: "Hurry." Without hesitation, Logan led the group in the opposite direction, searching for an alternate route. The corridors twisted and shifted unpredictably, as if the ship was actively trying to confuse them. Doors opened and closed on their own, leading to dead ends or looping back to places they'd already been. Time seemed to lose all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps only seconds passed. It was impossible to tell. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they found themselves standing before a massive door marked with the same glowing symbols they'd seen earlier. Logan hesitated, unsure whether opening it would help or hinder their escape. But with no other options available, he activated the mechanism, and the door slid open with a deafening groan. Beyond it lay a cavernous hangar bay, filled with strange machinery and dormant equipment. In the center of the room stood a sleek, alien craft unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its surface shimmered with iridescent colors as if it were made of liquid metal. Logan exchanged a glance with Rachel and Kyle, silently asking the same question. Could this be their ticket out? Before they could decide, the hangar lights dimmed, plunging the room into near darkness. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the space, reverberating in their chests. Shadows coalesced in the corners, taking on vaguely humanoid forms. They weren't alone anymore. "Move!" Logan shouted, breaking into a run toward the alien craft. Rachel and Kyle followed close behind, their hearts racing. Whatever those shadowy figures were, they didn't want to find out. Reaching the craft, Logan frantically searched for a way to activate it. The controls were unlike anything human, consisting of smooth panels and glowing orbs embedded in the surface. Rachel joined him, using her scanner to decipher the interface. "I think I've got it!" she exclaimed, pressing a sequence of orbs in rapid succession. The craft roared to life, its engines emitting a high-pitched whine that drowned out the growls behind them. The shadowy figures advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural. Logan shoved Kyle and Rachel inside, then leapt in after them just as the hatch sealed shut. For a moment, everything went silent. Then with a sudden lurch, the craft ascended, carrying them out of the hangar and into the void of space. Below them, the black ship loomed ominously, its surface writhing with dark energy. As they sped away, Logan glanced back at the others, his expression grim. "We're not done yet," he said. "That ship, It's still out there. And whatever's inside it, it's getting stronger. As the alien craft approached the Silver Dagger, Logan's mind raced with questions and doubts. The journey back had been eerily quiet, save for the hum of the strange vessel's engines. Rachel sat hunched over her scanner, reviewing the data she'd collected from the black ship while Kyle stared out the viewport, his face pale and drawn. None of them spoke much. The weight of what they'd discovered pressed heavily on their shoulders. When they finally docked with the Silver Dagger, Mia and Emma were waiting anxiously in the airlock chamber. Their expressions shifted rapidly, from relief at seeing their crewmates alive to confusion at the sight of the alien craft. "What is that thing?" Mia asked, her voice sharp with concern. "No time to explain," Logan said as he stepped off the craft. "We need to get moving. Now." Emma crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "Moving? Where? What happened down there?" Logan hesitated, glancing at Rachel and Kyle before answering. "The black ship isn't just a derelict, it's a prison. A containment unit for something unimaginable. And it's failing." Mia's eyes widened. "Failing? What does that mean?" "It means we're not safe here," Kyle interjected, his voice tight. "Whatever's inside that ship could break free at any moment. We need to put as much distance between us and it as possible." Rachel nodded, holding up her scanner. "I've got data, enough to figure out how the containment works, but we'll need time to analyze it. Somewhere far away from here." Logan turned to Mia. "Set a course for the nearest relay station. We'll send a message to command once we're clear of this sector." Mia didn't argue. She hurried to the bridge with Emma close behind. Logan, Rachel, and Kyle followed, their footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors of the Silver Dagger. The tension aboard the ship was palpable, each member of the crew lost in their own thoughts. For Logan, it was the image of Aegis, the glowing, sorrowful guardian, that haunted him. He couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of the black ship or its prisoner. Once everyone was gathered on the bridge, Mia plotted a new course, her fingers flying across the controls. The engines roared to life, and the Silver Dagger began to pull away from the asteroid field. Through the viewport, the black ship loomed ominously, its surface still absorbing all light. It seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive, watching them leave. "Do you think it knows we're gone?" Emma asked quietly, breaking the silence. "I don't know," Logan admitted, "but I'm not taking any chances." As the ship accelerated, Rachel leaned over her console, analyzing the data she'd collected. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. "This is bad," she muttered under her breath. "What is?" Logan asked, stepping closer. Rachel looked up, her face pale. "The containment systems, they're more compromised than I thought. Whoever built the black ship used some kind of energy matrix to hold the Devourer in place. But it's collapsing. Fast." "How fast?" Kyle demanded, his voice rising. Rachel hesitated. "Days. Maybe hours. Once the matrix fails completely, nothing will stop it from escaping." The room fell silent. Even Mia paused in her work, her hands hovering over the controls. Logan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Then we warn Earth. Command needs to know about this. If the Devourer gets loose..." He didn't finish the sentence. No one needed him to. The implications were clear enough. Hours passed as the Silver Dagger sped through space, putting distance between itself and the black ship. The crew worked tirelessly, preparing their report for command. Rachel pored over the data, trying to piece together how the containment system functioned. Kyle monitored the ship's systems, ensuring everything was running smoothly, while Mia kept a close eye on their trajectory. Emma handled communications, drafting the urgent message they would transmit once they reached the relay station. But despite their efforts, an uneasy feeling lingered among them. It wasn't just the threat of the Devourer that weighed on their minds. It was the sense that they were being watched. Shadows seemed darker, corners deeper, as if the black ship's influence extended beyond its physical form. Even the hum of the engines sounded different, distorted somehow, as though the ship itself was straining against an unseen force. Late into the night, Logan stood alone on the bridge, staring out at the endless void of space. His thoughts were a tangled mess of fear and responsibility. He had always prided himself on his ability to make tough decisions. But this was different. This wasn't just about saving his crew. It was about protecting humanity itself. And he wasn't sure they were ready for what was coming. "Captain?" Mia's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Logan nodded, gesturing for her to come closer. "What's on your mind?" Mia hesitated, glancing toward the viewport before speaking. "Do you really think we can stop it? The Devourer, I mean." Logan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. But we have to try. If we don't, no one else will." "That's not what I meant," Mia said softly. "I mean, do you think we're strong enough? Smart enough? Or are we just tiny specks in the grand scheme of things, completely outmatched?" Her words struck a chord deep within him. Logan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Maybe we're outmatched. Maybe we're not supposed to win, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that we fight, that we stand our ground and refuse to give up no matter how hopeless it seems." Mia nodded slowly, though her eyes remained troubled. "I just hope it's enough." Before Logan could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship, startling both of them. Red warning lights flashed on the control panels, and the ship shuddered violently. Logan grabbed the edge of the console to steady himself as Mia frantically scanned the readouts. "What's happening?" he demanded. "I don't know," Mia replied, her voice tinged with panic. "It's like something's pulling us back." Logan rushed to the viewport, his heart sinking as he saw the source of the disturbance. In the distance, the black ship had reappeared, its massive form looming larger than ever. It wasn't moving toward them, at least not physically, but its presence radiated outward, distorting the fabric of space itself. Gravity wells formed around it, tugging at the silver dagger with invisible force. "Reverse thrusters," Logan shouted. "Full power." Mia obeyed, her fingers flying across the controls. The engines roared louder, struggling against the pull of the black ship, but it wasn't enough. Slowly, inexorably, the silver dagger began to drift backward, dragged toward the abyss. "We're not going to make it," Kyle yelled as he burst onto the bridge, his face flushed with exertion. "Whatever that thing is doing, it's too strong." Rachel appeared moments later, clutching her scanner. "It's destabilizing the containment field. The Devourer is breaking free." Logan's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the black ship, not like this. There had to be another way. He turned to Rachel. "Is there anything we can do? Any way to reinforce the containment remotely?" Rachel shook her head, her expression grim. "Not without getting closer. And even then it might already be too late." Logan clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "Then we go back." Everyone stared at him, stunned. "Are you insane?" Kyle exclaimed. "If we go back, we're dead." "Maybe," Logan admitted. "But if we don't, billions of people die. We have to try." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mia straightened, her hands gripping the console tightly. "If we're doing this, we do it together." One by one, the others nodded, their fear giving way to determination. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they couldn't turn away. Not now. With a heavy heart, Logan gave the order. Mia set a course for the black ship, full speed ahead. As the silver dagger reversed direction, hurtling back toward the monstrous vessel, the crew prepared themselves for what might be their final mission. Each of them carried their own fears and hopes, their own reasons for fighting. But they shared one unshakable truth. They would face whatever came next. Together. Through the viewport, the black ship loomed larger and darker, its surface writhing with shadows that seemed almost alive. The Devourer was awakening, its hunger palpable even from afar. As they drew closer, Logan felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever awaited them inside that ship, it was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. And yet, as impossible as it seemed, they had no choice but to confront it. As the silver dagger approached the black ship for the second time, the tension aboard was almost unbearable. The crew moved silently, each person focused on their task, their movements precise but tinged with urgency. Logan stood at the helm, his hands gripping the edge of the console as he stared out at the looming monolith before them. It was larger than it had seemed during their first encounter, its surface darker and more menacing, as if it knew they were coming back. And it was waiting. Mia adjusted the controls, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We're entering its gravitational field," she said. "It's pulling us in harder this time." "Keep us steady," Logan replied, his tone firm. "We can't afford to lose control." Kyle monitored the ship's systems from the engineering station, his fingers flying over the panels. "Engines are holding, but they're straining. If we push them too hard, we could lose thrust entirely." Rachel sat nearby, reviewing the data she'd collected earlier. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've found something," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "There's a sequence, a pattern in the symbols we saw on the consoles. If we replicate it, we might be able to stabilize the containment field temporarily." "Temporarily?" Emma asked, her voice rising slightly. "How temporary?" "Minutes, maybe seconds," Rachel admitted. "But it might buy us enough time to figure out a permanent solution, or at least send a warning to Earth." Logan nodded, making a quick decision. "Do it. Program the sequence into the main console. We'll execute it as soon as we dock." The crew worked together with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized despite the chaos around them. As they neared the black ship, its pull grew stronger, shaking the Silver Dagger violently. Alarms blared intermittently, warning of structural stress, but Mia kept the ship steady, her hands moving deftly across the controls. Finally, they reached the airlock. Logan turned to the others, his expression resolute. "This is it. Once we're inside, there's no turning back. Stick to the plan, stay sharp, stay alert, and trust each other." One by one, the crew nodded. They suited up and prepared to board the alien vessel once again. This time, however, there was no hesitation, no second-guessing. They all understood the stakes, and they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The Dewey airlock opened with an ominous hiss, revealing the same dark corridor they had encountered before. But now, the atmosphere felt heavier, oppressive, as if the ship itself was alive and aware of their presence. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting unnaturally, and the faint blue strips that lined the hallway pulsed erratically, casting the group in flickering light. Logan led the way, his weapon drawn, though he doubted it would do much good against whatever awaited them. Rachel followed close behind, clutching her scanner tightly, while Kyle brought up the rear, his eyes darting nervously between the walls and the ceiling. Every sound echoed unnaturally, distorted by the ship's suffocating energy. They moved, quickly, retracing their steps toward the central chamber where they had first encountered Aegis. But the journey was far more treacherous this time. The corridors twisted and shifted unpredictably, leading them down paths that hadn't existed before. Doors slammed shut without warning, forcing them to find alternate routes. Time seemed to stretch and warp, making it impossible to gauge how long they had been walking. "This place is messing with us," Kyle muttered under his breath. "It's like it doesn't want us to reach the core." "It doesn't," Rachel replied grimly. "The Devourer knows we're here. It's trying to stop us." Despite the growing sense of dread, they pressed on, driven by sheer determination. When they finally reached the central chamber, they found it transformed. The crystalline structure at its center glowed brighter, pulsating with an erratic rhythm that made their heads ache. The glowing symbols on the surrounding consoles flared wildly, as if struggling to maintain control. And then, Aegis appeared once more. Its form was less stable this time, flickering like a dying light. The emotions it projected into their minds were raw and desperate: sorrow, anger, and a deep, unrelenting fatigue. It was clear that even the Guardian was losing strength, its power waning as the Devourer grew stronger. "You're running out of time," Logan said aloud, addressing the shimmering figure. "Tell us what to do." Aegis hesitated, its form wavering. Then, with a surge of effort, it projected a series of images into their minds. The sequence Rachel had identified earlier, the one they hoped would stabilize the containment field. was only part of the solution. To fully reinforce the prison, they would need to activate multiple systems simultaneously, each requiring precise timing and coordination. "We can do this," Logan said firmly, turning to the others. "Rachel, you handle the sequence. Kyle, monitor the energy levels and let me know if anything spikes. Emma, stay on comms and keep an eye on the Silver Dagger. Mia, I need you to oversee the entire operation." Everyone nodded, taking their positions around the chamber. Rachel approached one of the consoles, her hands trembling slightly as she entered the sequence. The symbols flared brightly, responding to her input. Across the room, Kyle watched the readings on his scanner, calling out updates as the energy levels fluctuated. "Stable for now," he reported, "but it's not going to last." "We don't need it to," Logan replied. "Just hold it together long enough for us to finish." As Rachel worked, the shadows in the chamber grew darker, coalescing into vague shapes that loomed menacingly. Low growls echoed through the space, reverberating in their chests. The devourer was close, its hunger palpable even through the thick walls of the ship. "Hurry," Emma urged, her voice tight with fear. "Something's coming." Rachel didn't respond, her focus absolute. Her fingers flew over the console, completing the final steps of the sequence. With a sudden burst of light, the crystalline structure at the center of the chamber stabilized, its glow becoming steady and calm. For a moment, the oppressive weight lifted and the shadows receded. "It's working," Kyle exclaimed, relief evident in his voice. But the victory was short-lived. A deep rumble shook the chamber, throwing them off balance. The walls cracked, and the glowing symbols on the consoles dimmed, their light flickering dangerously. "It's breaking free," Rachel shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Logan turned to Aegis, which was now little more than a faint outline. "What else can we do? Tell us." Aegis responded with a single, overwhelming emotion. Sacrifice. Someone would have to remain behind to manually override the failing systems, ensuring the containment held until reinforcements arrived, if they ever did. "No," Logan said immediately. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Kyle replied, his voice surprisingly steady. He stepped forward, his expression resolute. "I'll stay." "Kyle," Logan began, but the engineer cut him off. "I'm the best choice," Kyle said firmly. "You're the captain, you need to lead. Rachel's the only one who understands the tech well enough to guide the others. And Emma and Mia, they're needed on the ship. It has to be me." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of Kyle's decision hung heavy in the air, but there was no time to argue. Logan nodded slowly, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly. Kyle gave a small, sad smile. "Just make sure someone remembers what happened here." Without another word, Kyle moved to the central console, his hands steady as he began overriding the failing systems. The others exchanged a final glance before turning away, their hearts heavy, but their resolve unshaken. They had a mission to complete, and Kyle's sacrifice would not be in vain. As they ran back toward the airlock, the black ship trembled violently, its groans echoing through the corridors. The shadows returned, darker and more aggressive than before, but the crew pushed forward, driven by a shared purpose. Behind them, Kyle worked tirelessly, his every action buying precious seconds for his friends. When they finally reached the Silver Dagger, Logan took one last look at the black ship through the viewport. Its surface writhed with dark energy, cracks spreading across its hull like veins. Somewhere deep inside, Kyle was still fighting, holding the line against the unimaginable force that sought to escape. "Go," Logan ordered, his voice hoarse, with emotion. "Get us out of here." Mia didn't hesitate. She punched the engines to full power, and the Silver Dagger surged forward, leaving the black ship behind. As they sped away, a brilliant flash of light erupted in the distance, engulfing the vessel in a blinding explosion. When the light faded, the black ship was gone. No one spoke as they drifted through the void, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over them. They had survived, but at a cost none of them would ever forget. And though they couldn't be certain whether the devourer had truly been contained or merely delayed, one thing was clear. Humanity now knew of its existence and the threat it posed. Logan stared out at the stars, his mind racing with thoughts of the future. They had faced the unknown and emerged scarred but alive. But as he glanced at the faces of his crew, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity could stand strong. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough. The silence aboard the Silver Dagger was deafening. The crew sat in the common area, their faces pale and drawn, each lost in their own thoughts. The explosion that had consumed the black ship still lingered in their minds, a blinding flash of light followed by an eerie void where the monstrous vessel had once been. They had escaped, yes, but the cost weighed heavily on them. Kyle's sacrifice was etched into every corner of the ship, a constant reminder of what they had left behind. Logan sat at the head of the table, his hands clasped tightly together. He stared at the surface of the metal, as if searching for answers, written in its grooves. His voice broke the silence, low and strained. "We need to decide what happens next." Mia glanced up from her datapad, her expression conflicted. "Next? We barely made it out alive. What more can we do?" "We send a message," Rachel said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "We tell Earth everything, about the black ship, the Devourer, Kyle's sacrifice, everything. Humanity needs to know." Emma nodded slowly, her arms wrapped around herself. "But will they believe us? This sounds impossible. Even I'm having trouble processing it." "It doesn't matter if they believe us," Logan replied, his tone sharp but not unkind. "What matters is that we warn them. If even a fraction of what we saw is true, humanity isn't ready for something like the Devourer." Kyle's absence hung over the group like a shadow. No one wanted to say his name aloud, but it was there nonetheless, lingering in every pause, every exchanged glance. He had given his life to buy them time, and now it was their responsibility to honor that sacrifice. They owed him, and the countless lives he had saved, an explanation to the rest of the universe. Rachel pulled up the data she had collected during their brief encounters with the black ship. The information was fragmented, incomplete, but it painted a terrifying picture. The Devourer wasn't just a threat, it was a force of nature, a being so ancient and powerful that it defied comprehension. Its hunger was limitless, consuming worlds and civilizations without remorse or reason. And while the black ship had contained it for millennia, the containment was fragile, vulnerable to decay and interference. "We don't even know if we stopped it," Kyle muttered under her breath. "For all we know, it could already be free." Logan shook his head. "We have to assume the worst. If it's still trapped, we need to make sure it stays that way. If it's loose, then we prepare for whatever comes next." Preparations began immediately. Mia plotted a course for the nearest relay station, a distant outpost on the edge of human-controlled space. It would take days to reach it, but it was their best chance of transmitting a detailed report to Earth. Emma worked tirelessly on drafting the message, carefully choosing her words to convey both the urgency and gravity of the situation. She included everything: the black ship's appearance, Aegis's warnings, the destabilization of the containment field, and Kyle's ultimate sacrifice. Meanwhile, Rachel analyzed the remaining data, searching for any clue that might help humanity understand or combat the Devourer. Her findings were troubling. The black ship's technology was far beyond anything humans had ever encountered, built using principles of physics and energy manipulation that seemed almost magical. Replicating it would be nearly impossible, at least with current knowledge. But she also discovered something else, a faint signal embedded within the ship's systems. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but it pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Logan asked, leaning over her shoulder. "I don't know yet," Rachel admitted, her brow furrowed. "It could be residual energy from the containment field, or it could be something else entirely." "Something else?" Emma echoed, her voice tinged with unease. "Like what?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "I think it might be a failsafe, a backup system designed to activate if the primary containment failed. But I can't be sure without more time. Time was something they didn't have. As the Silver Dagger sped through space, the crew remained vigilant, scanning for any sign of pursuit. The black ship was gone, but none of them believed the Devourer was truly defeated. Its presence lingered in their nightmares, a dark specter haunting the edges of their consciousness. Days passed in tense monotony. The journey to the relay station felt endless, each hour stretching longer than the last. The crew took turns monitoring, the ship's systems ensuring they weren't being followed. But as they approached their destination, a new fear began to creep into their minds. What if the Devourer wasn't confined to the black ship? What if it could spread, infecting other vessels or even entire planets? We're not infected, are we? Mia asked suddenly, breaking the silence on the bridge. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her fear. No, Logan replied quickly, though his certainty wavered. If it had reached us, we'd know by now. But how can you be sure? Emma pressed, her eyes wide with worry. What if it's hiding inside us? Waiting. Rachel stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. We've run scans. None of us show any signs of contamination. Whatever the Devourer is, it hasn't touched us. Her words offered little comfort. The mere possibility was enough to keep them on edge, their nerves frayed and raw. Sleep became elusive, dreams plagued by visions of darkness and destruction. Even Logan, who prided himself on his composure, found himself staring into the void outside the viewport, questioning whether they had done enough, or if they had merely delayed the inevitable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the relay station came into view. It was a small utilitarian structure orbiting a barren moon, its surface dotted with antennas and communication arrays. To the crew of the Silver Dagger, it had never looked more welcoming. Mia guided the ship into dock, her hand steady despite her exhaustion. Once secured, the crew gathered their equipment and prepared to transmit their message. Logan led the way, his face grim but determined. They couldn't afford to waste a single moment. Inside the station, they accessed the main communication terminal, a bulky piece of machinery designed for long-range transmissions. Emma uploaded the message, her fingers trembling as she entered the final commands. When the process began, a wave of relief washed over them. But it was short-lived. The data streamed through the array. The station's system suddenly spiked. Lights flickered, and alarms blared, warning of an unexpected surge in power. Logan turned to Rachel, his voice sharp. What's happening? I don't know, Rachel replied, frantically scanning the readouts. It's like something's interfering with the transmission. Before anyone could react, the screen displaying the progress of the upload flickered, then went black. In its place appeared a single, glowing symbol, the same one they had seen on the consoles of the black ship. It pulsed rhythmically, filling the room with an oppressive energy. The signal, Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. It's not ours. Something else is broadcasting through the array. Logan drew his sidearm instinctively, though he knew it would do little good against whatever was happening. Shut it down, now. Mia rushed to the controls, her hands flying over the panel. But the station's systems were unresponsive, locked in place by an unknown force. The symbol grew brighter, its glow spreading across the walls and ceiling, bathing the room in an unnatural light. And then Aegis appeared. Its form was faint, almost translucent, struggling to maintain cohesion. The emotions it projected were desperate, urgent. Through fragmented images and sensations, it conveyed a single horrifying truth. The Devourer had found them. It's here, Emma gasped, backing away from the terminal. It followed us. No, Logan corrected, his voice tight with dread. It's been here all along. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The Devourer hadn't been contained within the black ship. It had been using it as a conduit, a means of spreading its influence. Every interaction they'd had with the vessel, every piece of data they'd collected, had carried traces of its essence. And now it had latched onto the relay station, using it to amplify its reach. We need to destroy the array, Logan ordered, his mind racing. If we can cut off its connection, we might stop it from spreading further. How? Kyle demanded. This whole place is tied into the network. If we damage the array, we risk losing the station and ourselves. There's no other choice, Logan replied grimly. If we don't act now, it'll use this station to broadcast itself across the galaxy. Billions of lives will be at risk. Without waiting for agreement, Logan moved toward the terminal, pulling a small explosive charge from his belt. The others watched in stunned silence as he attached it to the base of the array. Everyone get back to the ship now. What about you? Mia asked, her voice choked with emotion. I'll detonate it remotely, Logan lied, knowing full well that he wouldn't have time to escape. Just go. Reluctantly, the crew obeyed, retreating to the Silver Dagger. As the ship disengaged from the station, Logan activated the charge, bracing himself for the inevitable. The symbol flared brightly, its light consuming the room, and then everything went white. Back aboard the Silver Dagger, the crew watched in stunned silence as the relay station erupted in a brilliant explosion, its debris scattering across the void. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, finally, Mia broke the silence. Did we stop it? Logan's voice crackled over the comms, weak but resolute. I don't know, but we slowed it down. That's all we can do. The explosion of the relay station left a gaping hole in the void, its scattered remains drifting silently through space like forgotten debris. Aboard the Silver Dagger, the crew stared out at the wreckage, their faces pale and drawn. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. They had done what they could, what they had to, but none of them felt victorious. The weight of Logan's choice lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the sacrifices that had been made. Mia sat at the helm, her hands resting lightly on the controls. Her eyes were fixed on the viewport, but she wasn't really seeing the stars or the remnants of the destroyed station. Instead, her mind replayed the events of the past few days, the black ship, Kyle's sacrifice, the relentless presence of the Devourer. She clenched her fists tightly, trying to push away the guilt that gnawed at her. Do you think it's over? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not over, Rachel replied from behind her, her tone firm but tinged with exhaustion. She stood near the console, reviewing the last fragments of data they had salvaged before. Fleeing the black ship. We slowed it down, but we didn't stop it. It's still out there. Emma leaned against the wall, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face was pale, her expression haunted. What if it finds us again? What if it follows us back to Earth? Logan stepped onto the bridge, his movement slow and deliberate. His face was lined with fatigue, his eyes shadowed with the burden of leadership. He had stayed behind to detonate the explosive charge, knowing full well that he might not survive. But fate, or perhaps sheer luck, had spared him, leaving him to carry the weight of their failures and successes alike. It won't follow us, he said firmly, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Not yet? We've bought ourselves some time. That's all we can ask for. But how much time? Emma pressed, her voice rising slightly. Hours, days, weeks, and then what? Do we just wait for it to come knocking on our doorstep? We use the time wisely, Logan replied, his tone steady despite the turmoil inside him. We prepare. We warn Earth. We do everything we can to make sure humanity is ready when it comes. Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. If we can decode the data I collected, we might find something useful. There has to be a way to fight it. A weakness, a pattern, something, assuming we live long enough to figure it out, Kyle muttered under his breath, his voice bitter. Logan shot him a sharp glance, but he didn't argue. The truth was, they were all running on borrowed time. None of them knew how far the Devourer's influence extended or whether it could track them across the vastness of space. Every system aboard the Silver Dagger had been scanned multiple times, every line of code checked for anomalies. So far, nothing unusual had been found, but that didn't mean they were safe. As the hours passed, The crew worked tirelessly to piece together their next steps. Mia plotted a course for Earth, choosing a route that avoided populated sectors and high-traffic areas. The less attention they drew, the better. Emma focused on refining their message, adding details about the destruction of the relay station and Logan's final act of defiance. Rachel buried herself in the data, searching for anything that might give humanity an edge against the looming threat. But even as they worked, the tension aboard the ship remained palpable. Shadows seemed darker, corners deeper, as if the black ship's influence lingered in their minds. Sleep became elusive, dreams plagued by visions of endless voids and ravenous entities. Conversations were brief and strained, each word weighed down by unspoken fears. Days turned into weeks as the Silver Dagger journeyed homeward. The closer they got to Earth, the more their anxiety grew. What would they find when they arrived? Would anyone believe their story? Or would they be dismissed as delusional, their warnings ignored until it was too late? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Earth came into view. Its blue-green surface shimmered brightly against the blackness of space, a beacon of life and hope in an otherwise indifferent universe. For a moment, the crew allowed themselves to feel a flicker of relief. Home, safety, refuge. But the feeling didn't last. As they approached orbit, their sensors picked up something unusual, an energy signature emanating from the planet's surface. It was faint, almost imperceptible but unmistakably familiar. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she analyzed the readings. "It's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It followed us." The room fell silent, the gravity of her words sinking in. Logan moved to the viewport, his jaw tightening as he stared at the planet below. "How?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The black ship," Rachel replied, her voice hollow. "Its systems were tied into ours. Even after the explosion, traces of it must have remained. Enough for the Devourer to latch onto." Emma sank into a nearby chair, her face pale. "So, what now? We came all this way, risked everything, and it's still here. What's the point?" Logan turned to face her, his expression resolute. "The point is that we keep fighting. We warned Earth, we gave them a chance. Now it's up to them and us to decide what happens next." Mia adjusted the controls, guiding the ship into orbit. "We should land somewhere remote," she suggested. "Somewhere we can regroup and figure out our next move." "No," Logan said firmly. "We go straight to command. If the Devourer is already here, we don't have time to hide. Humanity needs to know the truth." The decision was unanimous, though none of them felt confident about it. As the Silver Dagger descended through Earth's atmosphere, the crew braced themselves for whatever awaited them. The planet below looked peaceful, serene even, but they knew better. Beneath its tranquil surface, something dark and insatiable lurked, waiting for its moment to strike. When they landed, military personnel were already waiting for them, their faces grim and unreadable. Logan led the way off the ship, his posture rigid, his expression determined. He didn't wait for questions. Instead, he launched into an explanation, recounting everything they had seen, everything they had done. The officers listened in silence, their expressions growing darker with each passing moment. By the time Logan finished, the room was heavy with tension. One of the officers, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, finally spoke. "You're telling us that an ancient force capable of destroying entire civilizations is loose on Earth, and that it's only a matter of time before it acts?" "Yes," Logan replied, his voice steady. "And if we don't act quickly, it will consume everything." The officer exchanged glances with her colleagues before nodding slowly. "Then we'll mobilize. Every resource, every scientist, every soldier. We'll throw everything we have at this. But you need to understand, if what you're saying is true, we may not win." "We don't have to win," Logan said firmly. "We just have to survive long enough to fight back." As the meeting concluded, the crew of the Silver Dagger was ushered into a secure facility. where they would assist in decoding the data and preparing humanity's response. It was a daunting task, one that stretched the limits of their endurance, but they didn't falter. Each of them carried the weight of their sacrifices: Kyle's bravery, Logan's resolve, Rachel's determination, and they refused to let those sacrifices be in vain. In the weeks that followed, humanity rallied. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze the data. Soldiers trained for a battle unlike any they had faced before, and governments set aside their differences to unite against a common enemy. The Devourer's presence loomed large, its shadow cast over every corner of the globe. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also hope, a fragile, flickering light that refused to be extinguished. Logan stood on the roof of the facility, one night staring up at the stars. The sky was clear, the constellations bright, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human understanding, the Devourer waited. It was patient, methodical, and unstoppable, but so was humanity. "We'll stop it," Rachel said softly, joining him on the rooftop. "Somehow." Logan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah, we will." And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the fight was far from over.